he knows how to plant. Meanwhile, the masculine manly men, they all go on vacations to mountain lodges together and stay in tight quarters doing, things that we, as a modern listener, might hear and say, okay, I mean, that seems a little bit gay. You're listening to Second Cut. This is the podcast where we talk about topics in film theory, criticism, and history because we like doing it. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who did live in a dorm.
I'm Sam. I'm the one who's never abducted a woman off the streets.
Kieran, what's your thing?
I don't live in gothic haunted houses, but kind of wish I do.
So we're talking about reading films in queer theory ways because they are specifically films that come from the era where the Hays Code was not the official doctrine, but the sort of self-regulation guidelines for the film industry. Starting in the 1930s, it was written in 1930, on into its kind of breakdown and the incoming of the MPAA in the 1960s.
The late 60s, there is a reason why in sort of 67, 68, 69, all the horror movies suddenly become much more violent and have much more gratuitous nudity. It's because the Hays Code just died and they're like, oh, okay, we can do this now. It's quite funny.
Yes.
This is why Hammer with the lesbian vampire movies essentially did that, because they're like, oh, we can do that.
Yeah,
okay.
Hammer definitely embraced their new freedoms with gusto, didn't
they? Yes.
Yeah, so the Hays Code, it was the motion picture production code, and Hays was like the head of the PCA. I wish I could remember what that stood for, but anyway. Production code, something, whatever. They wrote the rules for regulating film, and sort of Hollywood was scared of government regulation in this era. They didn't want censorship, so they thought, okay, we'll censor ourselves. We'll put a really hardcore, religious guy in charge, and he will appeal to anybody who sort of is concerned about this art form and the things that it shows and puts out into culture. And the key clause from the code, found a copy in a book that I can't remember the title of. It's 1930 code.pdf. Sex perversion or any inference to it is forbidden. So that's Hays Code language for no homosexuality or other non-normative sexual behavior. That is how the Hays Code relates to this episode and these readings and sort of the implications behind the writing of these films too, in some or all cases.
And I mean, this is kind of my fault. So it's kind of, I went to the first conference I was at a couple of years ago. One of the talks was it was a postgraduate conference, and I've just found the program still in my phone, by Elise McManus. I have no idea which university she attended or anything like that, but it's called Spectral Lesbianism in McCardle's The Uninvited and Du Maurier's Rebecca. So it was specifically comparing The Uninvited and Rebecca. And the thing I've always taken away from that was her comment that essentially, although the Hays Code did a lot of bad, it meant that they did actually have to write women as characters, other than just things to be kind of looked at and ogled at, which actually allowed them to kind of, because you had to do that for all the characters, you could actually explore kind of queerness in a strange way and actually have to do some stuff rather than just put it, in your face for essentially fetishistic purposes. And so that comment has lingered in the back of my mind for a while. When we were discussing stuff for Pride Month, I kind of came up with this idea of kind of Hays Code sort of queer film, being incredibly, all three of us, the most, I think, authoritative people to speak on queerness in film. Three straight white males, definitely. We are the number one authorities on this at all. But I just thought it was an interesting topic.
Well,
and slightly different to the usual Pride Month stuff.
Me and Sam took Queer Theory 101 when we watched John Waters movies, so
That's true.
yeah. But yeah, the code also, obscenity. You can't have word, gesture, reference, song, joke, or suggestion around like inappropriate things. You also can't have sympathy for crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. Basically the films need to have good triumph over evil, moral over wrongdoing, and characters needed to be punished if they engaged in certain immoral acts that were permissive to be shown on screen or suggested or whatever.
And I had this quote from the Celluloid Closet, which says, for all its efforts, the production code didn't erase homosexuals from the screen, it just made them harder to find. So, it's like they're always there, but it's like, as long as you're not outright coming out and saying these are gay characters, you can read between the lines, there is visibility there, and evidence for people of like every point on like the sexual spectrum. It's they've always been there. It's just you can't be explicit about it, which kind of makes a lot of these films more interesting, because it makes you work for like the subtext.
It's a bit like I saw somebody had put a collection of kind of Shakespeare memes and stuff together that apparently somebody somewhere was going, oh, try and find me anything suggestive in Shakespeare, I day. And it's like, he was always doing it, like, every single time. And it's like, go back to Greek mythology, like, everyone was gay back there. Like, it's just kind of what happened, and the idea that it's been never been a thing is ridiculous. So it's just interesting to kind of explore this, especially from a kind of we have to hide ourselves point of view. It just makes it just incredibly, interesting.
Well, it helps that like Freud was a big thing in the code era, so you could use like provocative imagery, and people would kind of understand things visually that aren't expressed. And I'm thinking of cat people here, but like there are ways that you can express queerness on film that are coded, but people will recognize. And one of the people that recognized it was censors. We'll get into our movies in a little bit and maybe touch on some specific instances of that. But censors and audiences back then weren't stupid. They were aware of like queerness. Queer was a term that meant, gay, I think in the OED by 1894 is what I read. So like the use of straight in the Uninvited doesn't mean that, but there is intent from creators and filmmakers and discussing and putting out queer things into film. And the Celluloid Closet talks about the different ways and archetypes, but it's to varying effect, but there's awareness at least.
Yeah, heads up to everyone. We will be referencing the Celluloid Closet pretty much all throughout this, and probably into any potential future episodes we do on queer cinema. I think it's one of these ones that kind of was one of the first kind of big milestones in queer cinema, so everyone kind of has to go back at some point, if only to go, we've discussed it, let's move on. So heads up to that.
And despite it being like 30 years old, over 30 years old now, as a piece of work, as a piece of kind of study, it's there's still a lot of relevance to it. A lot of stuff still remains true. It's really interesting looking back at it.
The documentary was 95, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think the book might have been about 5 years before that.
I think the book was like 81, 82, something like that.
Oh, was it? Was it even further back? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
we've talked
all
about
of the different. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say we've kind of mentioned it passing in previous episodes, talking about like film noir and how they had to kind of be quite clever in terms of kind of what they could actually picked on screen and what was left to kind of just implied, or kind of just off screen. You could have depict all kinds of disturbing stuff, but as long as it wasn't actually on screen, you kind of get away with it. And it was kind of like same depiction of kind of queer characters. I mean, one of the classic examples is in a film Noir again is in The Maltese Falcon is Peter Lorre's character, who just is basically explicitly gay, even if they're not actually coming out and saying this is a gay character. It's just his kind of flamboyant actions and the references to like the perfume he wears and kind of the way he plays with his cane, while he's speaking to Bogart. It's just it's all kind of there in the text. You just and that feeds back into like one of the common kind of common tropes, which I'm sure we'll touch on a few times in this episode, is the gay villain. Because if they're seen as like deviants by society at this point, then if we're going to have explicitly gay characters in film, they've got to be the villains. They've got to get their just desserts by the end of it. So
certainly.
Yeah, and that plays into, a little spoiler on Tea and Sympathy, but like, it's an easy point of reference where, yes, the character is like perceived as gay by people around him, but the film has to resolve it. No, he is straight. He marries a woman. You have to revert to the proper, this is quotes, proper moral sort of stance. In the eyes of American culture.
And we'll just ignore the fact that many gay men over the years have married women, whether for appearances or otherwise.
Yes, that is also true. But like the nice thing about the production code is it's mostly about text. It's not really easy to litigate subtext because, they'd figure this out later, but a lot of that happens in the decoding and the reception. And even if they made perfectly innocent films that are not discussing sexuality, someone out there could still interpret things in a certain way just because of where they're at. And queer readings can stem from, experience and individuals, and it could be their way of thinking about and interpreting thoughts and ideas because of fiction.
Yeah, and it's not even always about the kind of intentional kind of what the author kind of puts in the text themselves, and how they intend it to be read, But it's not to say it's not there if they didn't intend it. It's just it's how you're responding to kind of the what you're watching or what you're reading. It's it can mean many different things to many different audience members.
Well, this is Roland Barthes' whole point, the death of the author, that as soon as something is written down, it is out of the hands of the author. It can then be interpreted in any way that you want. There may be an intended message in there, which is probably a lot of the time a lot stronger than other messages in there, but there may be other things as well. So, this is kind of semiotic theory 101 as well.
I think of whenever Tarantino has that scene in, is it True Romance? I don't remember. The one where it's about Top Gun, and it's using queerness as like a way to counter read a film. Whether or not Top Gun is about homosexuality, you could very easily read it that way. For its gazy aspects and its intimate homosocial relations. A lot of interesting ways for Top Gun to be gay.
And this is the whole thing with kind of reading films, that people will get out of it completely different things. I remember somebody telling to me that a lot of people in kind of especially kind of the gay community who had lost people to sort of AIDS connected quite a lot with Train Spotting. Of all films, even though that's nothing to do with sexuality, the kind of drug use and dying in the kind of addiction and overdose and kind of the horrible descent into that kind of thing, kind of paralleled with them in kind of other ways as well. So it's reading into a film is kind of what you read into it.
Yeah, there's another kind of subculture dealing with the death of people who are far too young, to die normally, whether you're dying of AIDS or dying of an overdose or blood poisoning, it's you can definitely see kind of how kind of the message and kind of the implications can kind of carried over those different kinds of stories.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here, and it's the main point Russo touches on, is that gays and lesbians have always existed in film history, and it's not some new social idea that we're just now recently discussing, where there's gay characters in our scary movie. No, I mean, this is discourse older than a decade ago.
This is, again, James Chapman's point in the new film history, that there is not film history, there are only film histories. It depends how you read everything. It depends how you construct a canon. The idea that there is now queer film is kind of only if you decide to read it in a certain way. If you go and study other aspects, if you go and study queer cinema, then it'll be right from the beginning. Rather than some emergence that happened in the 70s or 80s,
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into Dracula's Daughter from 1936.
Yeah. Vampires.
Possibly the first of many, many lesbian vampire films. So Dracula's Daughter is a direct sequel to the 1931 Dracula with Bela Lugosi. Originally, it was envisaged as a film that would be directed by James Whale and star again Bela Lugosi, and kind of inspired by Dracula's Guest, kind of the lost kind of chapter of Dracula by Bram Stoker. But it didn't. That version of the story basically fell apart for a variety of reasons. They lost Whale, they lost Lugosi, and they decided, right, we'll start from scratch. We'll just say Dracula had a daughter, and we'll get her to do vampire stuff just like he did, but we'll make her a bit guilty about it instead of being like an absolute kind of irredeemable monster this time. So the general plot is Dracula's been destroyed, but his curse lives on through his progeny, who was Countess Maria Zakaska, played by Gloria Holden, who tries to escape her dark lineage and start a new life back in Transylvania with her chosen companions. And I'm going to come on to why she says it's the guy she wants to take, but I'm not sure it is really. So it's a pretty kind of typical Universal horror in terms of kind of how it looks and the way it's structured. You got all the usual beats, you got a group of heroes trying to find the monster picking people off and trying to evade them. But there's some more interesting kind of subtextual stuff going on, which kind of puts it above most of the other kind of mid-tier kind of universe horrors, which I'd say this is what it is. It's kind of definitely, kind of the kind of, I think 31 universe horrors there were. I'd say it's definitely right in the middle of that pack, I'd say. But yeah, kind of, it's more interesting in terms of what's implied to be than what it actually is in many ways. So
I will point out very quickly that obviously Vampire, the Carl Dreyer movie from 1972, drew upon Carmilla in certain aspects for it, but kind of got rid of a lot of the lesbianism in it and everything like that. So now it's just kind of like the thing is like inspired by a story from Inner Glass Darkly. It's like, well, this is Carmilla because it's the only vampire story in there. There's no lesbians. Somebody told them to cut it.
Meanwhile,
probably one of the
I'm just
first
thinking
lesbian vampire movies.
I'm just thinking about The Sopranos. They're like Carmella, and I'm like, okay, Tony's gonna come in and yell at her. Like, I didn't really understand that was adapted from something else, so I was just confused.
Michael Mallory, who did a really good kind of summary of all like the Universal horror films. Like, he's this gorgeous coffee table book with a load of behind the scenes photos and kind of summaries of each of the film, which I flicked through again earlier on. He basically doesn't really have much to say on Dracula's Daughter. I think it takes like a page and a half of like a 100-page tome, But he basically says, today the film is best known for its surprising hint of lesbianism, which was hardly a safe or popular topic of films in the 30s. which censors totally missed. So apparently they could have probably gone a bit kind of more full on with it, because it completely went over censors' heads at the time. There was no talk at all of it being kind of trimmed down, or kind of the questionable stuff being excised. They just saw it as just a general scene of like of a vampire preying on the latest human victim.
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, I think this is part of just the idea of lesbianism anyway, because obviously kind of there were acts throughout the 1800s kind of banning homosexuality, and obviously Oscar Wilde as well. And pretty much every act banning homosexuality or criminalising it was specifically aimed at gay men. So again, in the book for the Celluloid... Go ahead.
Yeah. It's basically a sizable portion of society believed that lesbians either didn't exist or they were women just going through a phase,
Yeah. So in the Celluloid Closet, again in the book version, there's a thing where Queen Victoria informed that a certain woman was a lesbian, asked what a lesbian might be. When the term had been explained, she flatly refused to believe that such creatures existed. So, when the German gay liberation movement, paragraph 175 apparently, outlawed homosexual acts between men, but omitted any mention of lesbians. So, those only things, it's just like, oh, gay men can't do it, but women, you can do what you want, because we don't believe you actually exist. Straight men can't get the idea in their heads, essentially, at that point, which is quite funny.
Yeah. I think this kind of lesbians kind of seen as like the non-threatening kind of arm of kind of homosexuality, to society. They weren't going to be tearing apart families, and I don't know. I just think gay men in particular, they were definitely seen as more of a kind of a downfall of society. At the time, something to be ashamed of. Whereas, like I say,
again in the Celluloid Closet, I managed to get sort of 10 pages through. Our amazing researcher would get 5 pages through and go, "We've read it all." But this is how all our university essays were written. References to page 3 and 4.
I couldn't be bothered reading any of it, so I watched the film. So I watched the film version, so I didn't have to read.
Yeah. So it probably goes over the same thing because it was adapted from the book. But a lot of kind of the beginning is essentially going the kind of. For a long, long time, notions of kind of sexuality is essentially we start with men and it's a male domain and kind of adapt it to female. So essentially it is more threatening for a man to lose kind of sexuality rather than a female to gain it. Because it's all about men being strong and kind of women to be strong. It's like, oh, you're trying to compete with men, so it's almost like a well done, you've joined the club. For a man to be kind of feminized in the way it is kind of worse. So it's more of a focus on the male side rather than the female side.
Yeah. I mean, in the documentary, you had Quentin Crisp as one of the talking heads. This infamous flamboyant gay kind of writer and socialite. Played by John Hurt in 2 TV movies, very memorably. But he said, on this kind of point, about feminized men and women being perceived as butch or masculine. He said, "There's no sin like being a woman. When a man dresses as a woman, everyone laughs. But when a woman dresses as a man, nobody laughs." So it's definitely seen. It's that kind of aberration of kind of nature of what things should be, in polite society.
It's like white chicks versus the crying game. I get it.
Yeah.
Essentially, the long run of this is that all this means that essentially, if it had been kind of essentially, if Dracula's daughter had been Dracula's son, I think the censors would have picked up on it. Because it's Dracula's daughter and there's lesbian subtext, it's managed to go under the radar because they just didn't contemplate it.
Yeah. I mean, I think 5 or 6 years later, you did have The Son of Dracula with Lon Chaney. But funny enough, they didn't have a gay subtext to that at all. Funny that. I mean, a few things I noticed in this, just before I can get into the meat of it. Obviously, it's mostly set in London, or kind of a Hollywood approximation of London, as they all are. I mean, one thing I love about films of this era, Hollywood films of this era, You know, I've noticed that no one's ever as British as British cops in Hollywood movies. You know, just the cops who are basically the tasked with guarding Dracula's coffin, you know, after he's been staked. You know, they're keeping him on ice basically until someone can come take it away and bury him. But yeah, these two like comedy characters kind of in the police station, basically arguing over who has stand guard and who gets to go and meet the detective inspector arriving from Scotland Yard. You know.
Gives me the creep sitting here. I ain't moving. Like, I'll go speak to you.
Yeah.
Something. Hello. What's going on here then? You know.
Yeah. All that. Yeah. I also noticed that. Yeah. So it's always a dead giveaway. You're American playing a Brit when you pronounce Edinburgh as Edinburgh.
Okay. Thank you. I wondered why the British accents were so terrible. In some points.
Yeah. I think the only major Brit in this is, funny enough, is Gloria Holden, is Dracula's daughter herself. You know, I think all the others are pretty much American doing terrible British accents. But you know, you kind of expect it from this era of B movie. You know, it doesn't really bother me that much.
This movie
I will
also
say that obviously
it looks like
Brits do
it was
American
made to
accents
be a
at times.
silence film.
Yeah. Well, because all the acting is very big, and expressive,
and very like painterly, and I don't know.
Yeah.
It's and the lighting is so like just bright across so much of the screen and the figures.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the first 5 or so years of Universal Horrors, they were still very much in that era of kind of referencing like German expressionism and making everything kind of, you get these really stylistic kind of high contrast kind of lighting, and a lot of it I think was to disguise the cheapness of the sets as well. You know, I think if you can kind of plunge the back into shadow and then just put your key lights, you know, on the actors' faces or kind of key kind of elements of the set, then you know kind of it helps no end. I mean, this of course like ends up like recycling, you know, the sets, you know, from the earlier films. So I think it was the same Dracula's castle set, you know, the same kind of interior of like the kind of the drawing rooms and stuff. You know, they kind of kept all those kind of, you know, in storage, you know, for the next projects. You know,
if it works, it works.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you also have Van Helsing in this returning to basically do the same Edward Van Sloan again, who you know, basically to fill the same role as he did in Dracula, except this time a lot of the cops especially think he's mad and they're trying to get him sectioned essentially, or tried for murder because well, if an old man just stabs a guy with a stake and his excuse is a vampire, you're probably gonna think that. I mean, that's another kind of interesting about this. There is sort of, though it's still like a period set piece, you know, it's still meant to be like the era of like the original Dracula. It's meant to be like, you know, like the late 1800s, early 1900s, depending on which version you're doing. But there are some nods towards modernity in this, even though it's set like immediately after the original Dracula. They're kind of trying to bring like rationalism into this and skeptics, you know, against all the supernatural stuff, which found kind of interesting. The main the hero character, I've already forgotten his name, Doctor whatever he is. But he's a psychologist.
That sounds
right. Who's
very tall.
He's very tall. And you have his initial introduction to the Countess in this. You know, he's almost trying to diagnose her because he just thinks she's delusional. She's not quite coming out and saying, I'm a creature of the night and have an insatiable kind of a hunger for blood. He just thinks she's mentally ill, essentially. And so I'll give you therapy. You know, we'll get to the root of your problem and we'll be better than ever. And there is that other theme in this about like, you know, now Dracula's gone, you know, she's like the curse has been passed on to her. I mean, obviously we never know. Did he turn his daughter, or when you're born of a vampire, are you a vampire from birth? It depends on which version of the mythology you go with. But however, she came about. She's obviously carried on like the vampire curse, and but she's still thinking. She's thinking, oh, now he's gone. Maybe this is my chance. Maybe the curse has been lifted. Maybe I can.
Very kind of
I can live. I can live my own life. My own liberty. There's a quote. She literally says the theme out loud at one point. She says, free to live as a woman, free to take my place in the bright world of the living instead of among the shadows of the dead, which I also thought was maybe a veiled reference to coming out, possibly, living your best self, living your truth. So, obviously the most infamous scene in this, the main reason this film is known is the scene where she goes out hunting one night, and she brings a homeless woman back with her, kind of under the pretense saying, "Oh, you've got marvelous bone structure. I would love to I'd love to paint you." So, and I think it's implied that this kind of thing she's done before as well. So basically, she gets her back to her apartment, and they get straight away the very suggestive, "You won't object to removing your blouse, will you?" Because it's going to be she's doing a study of the female with neck and shoulders, I think she says. So of course you're going to see those parts of the woman. So
we should just reiterate very quickly, in order to save the podcast, Sam does not do this.
No, I'm in no ways a predatory lesbian.
I'm glad we've cleared that up.
Yeah.
Yes.
But essentially it's you've got the vampire aspect. You've got basically the creature of night bringing a victim back and she's going to feed on her, but equally she wants something else. I did notice in this film she hunts and kills men, but hunts and appreciates, then kills women. So it's like there's another step in there. There's like a certain aesthetic kind of I don't know, longing going on there. She likes to, she likes to take in her victim before she actually gives into her animalistic instincts. And this can be seen as like, again, like it's almost like a sexual assault kind of scene, isn't it? Really, it's like this woman kind of gets quite frightened quite quickly and has to get out there, and basically the Countess kind of ends up killing her kind of before she intends to. Essentially, she kind of. It's quite it's an interesting scene for the era, for a film of this era. But I think you can take it even further, because the main heroine as well, she's kind of, her and the male lead, basically, the Countess, she's kind of involved with them both, because she's basically she's trying to get the guy to go with her back to Transylvania, and so she can turn him and he can be her mate for all eternity. But really, I think really she's and she uses the heroine to get him to agree to that. She basically kidnaps her and threatens her and say, "Yeah, come with me, or I'm going to kill her." But I kind of see it more as like a story of. This might be stretching a bit, but I'm going to run with it. I see this as a story of two lesbians fighting over their male friends maintained for appearance's sake. So I think that they're both lusting after each other, really. But and the guy's just there because we've got to have a guy around. It's the 1900s. We can't be doing this kind of stuff in polite society. But if we've got husbands, then we can't be gay, surely.
Yep, and it's fine.
And I think the idea almost is like you need like a male Igor figure or Renfield to do the stuff for you in public.
Exactly. And she's also.
Dracula's daughter wants a bank account and needs a guy to do it.
Yeah. She's obviously got her assistant as well, hasn't she? The ambiguously kind of ethnic kind of henchman, basically, who accompanies her throughout, and it's basically like a vampiric thrall, I suppose. But he actually ends up killing her in the end, which again goes back to this trope of killing your gays. You can't have a homosexual character, see it through to the other side. Unfortunately, in this era, and
I
that
do
was
want
a
to
trope
ask him. Maybe Sam
persisted
will
for decades. Yeah, go on.
because he's much more the Universal, even though I've seen them all as well, but many years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, original Dracula, and then going into this direct sequel literally takes place like seconds after.
Yep.
What happens to the brides?
Equally, you could ask what happens to the Harkers. They're not in this either.
I was going to say, there's so many people that aren't in it. It's just like
the only person who was free on that week was Edward Van Sloan.
Yeah,
I mean, even Bela Lugosi in this. So he was obviously originally going to be starring in direct sequel. That never happened. Amazing to think that the only two Dracula films he starred in for Universal were Dracula and Abbott and Costello. So it's
and yet buried in his Dracula cape.
Yeah. But interestingly, you see a figure in the coffin in the opening scene, with the stake through his arm, which is more than you see in the original Dracula, actually, because you don't actually see him get staked. You see someone lunge off camera and then he's kind of dead. The figure in the coffin is a waxwork in the likeness of Bela Lugosi. And apparently he was paid $500 more for his likeness to be used in this film than he was for actually playing Dracula in 1931.
Beautiful.
So, I think he was given $4,000 for his likeness to be used in this film, and he was paid around $3,500.
I think that literally proves the maxim about art, which is you're worth more dead than alive.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So again, from the Celluloid Closet, there's this line about Hollywood had learned to write movies between the lines, and some members of the audience had learned to watch them that way as well. So this, understandably, is a very popular film in the kind of queer communities, and I think they have embraced kind of the Countess Zakeska as kind of a queer icon, and even though she's devious and predatory, but she's kind of she's just trying to live her best life and live her truth, and have fun back home, free of kind of the control of of heteronormative, patriarchal society and dead vampire dads, So, I think you can read as much or as little as you want into this, but I'd say it's not a very interesting film if you don't read these kind of things into it. So I'd recommend you do, because it's entertaining. And, it works as a schlocky kind of horror film. It's entertaining, it's pretty funny in places, and
very short.
Kind of twisted in others. And it's 75 minutes. Why wouldn't, if that, why would you not want to?
But as we know from these Universal movies very early on, we still obviously there's no singing, but there is a Transylvanian musical number near the end.
We do go back to generic Eastern European town on the Universal backlot that they use in all of them, basically.
Where
I was
everybody
expecting
plays kind of folk instrument and dances everywhere.
Yeah, I was expecting someone to break into song, after Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, but no such luck in this. I say, middle of the pack as Universal horror films go, but kind of interesting and worth a watch, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, I will be very upset if ever we go to some kind of rural kind of Slavic nations and I walk into the town square and there's not a couple of hundred villagers playing folk instruments and dancing. I will be very upset and tell them that all these films have lied to me.
Yeah. Oh, I do have one final quote, which was again from the Celluloid Closet documentary. So, Jan Oxenberg, as a writer and director, she kind of told this kind of story of like her experience with hanging out with her both gay, lesbian and straight friends, to be honest. But she says kind of as like a lesbian kind of moviegoer and cinephile. She kept having this conversation of, she said, a friend will call me up and say, there's a movie you must see, there's this incredible lesbian relationship and there's a great love scene. All right, they're vampires, but still a good movie.
I mean, surely this just makes it better.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was almost like for a long time, it was like the acceptable kind of, the preferred kind of method of delivery of your lesbian stories, just slap some fangs on them and
It just reminds me in school at the moment we've got a couple of there's one teacher and then like one of the students as well, Belle, who is it started because I read out the full actual title of the Pope, which doesn't have the word Pope in it, but in it is the phrase Primate of Italy. So she's writing a musical called How I Became the Secret Lesbian Primate of Italy.
Oh my god.
Which I think like is just so like Hayes queer coded, like it's untrue. I reckon like that just for some reason, just like that phrase, just like yep.
Yeah. So shall we segue into some slightly classier horror? Go from vampires to ghosts, gothic ghost story.
Yeah, with actual ghosts in it, which is strange.
Because doesn't happen very often.
No, especially as essentially, again, this whole thing kind of stemmed from a talk I saw many years ago, comparing this and Rebecca. And there's a reason why they're compared together. It's because The Uninvited was one of a couple of movies that was literally made straight off the back of Rebecca to cash in on Rebecca. It's not like Hitchcock, got people imitating his works. It's not like that's how Coppola got it started at all, ever. But we will be coming to Rebecca in the future, so I'm going to try not to talk about that too much.
Well, Kieran, talk about this awesome old ghost film, because I was watching this and I was like, oh, somebody went and saw this and this was their like Paranormal Activity. They were like, oh my god, this ghostly figure that they have put into this film. I was fascinated by that because I don't watch a lot of old ghost movies.
I mean, old ghost movies, like as much as it goes, and I think the interesting thing of this is that it was made in 1944, which obviously you've got input from the British film industry. I'm not sure how much. It's probably an American film that was just made with the kind of part British kind of like locations and stuff like that, but it is set in Cornwall, and you've got a couple that they come from America. I can't remember. It's been a couple of weeks since I watched it.
I think they're meant to be British, but they've got weird transatlantic accents, which is kind of even weird.
Like everyone had around there.
Even weirder considering Ray Milland was Welsh. I don't know why he just couldn't be Welsh in this book.
They said they were Londoners in Ireland or something like that. And I was like, okay, but they sound like they're Americans doing bad accents or mid-Atlantic accents. And I don't understand why. So good. I'm glad I had the right read here.
Yeah. So anyways, Ray Milland and his sister, who essentially are kind of going around, and they stumble upon this old house and they were like, oh, this would be great to buy it because Ray Milland's like, trying to make money as a musician and is just scraping by, and his sister's like, oh, just pack that in and work on your symphonies, you can do everything there. And it's like, we do not have the time. You can do it. So they buy a mansion instead.
Kieran, you left off the best character in this movie, Bobby the dog.
Oh yeah, Bobby the dog. So it's kind of the dog's reason. They're like, we could do that, but the dog will never go into a particular room. Stairs, I think. Which
and he chases a squirrel.
Yeah, it does very much a Disney Up in that respect. But yeah, so they buy this house, and guess what? Definitely big old house, by the cliffs. Nothing can possibly go wrong. And the guys that they buy it off are kind of the old kind of grandfather with a daughter who's obviously eligible for Ray Milland, because obviously we have to have some kind of romance involved, otherwise apparently we're not going to get the punters in.
And in this era it's always going to be someone in their mid to late 30s and 40s going out with someone who's probably got 18 to 20.
Yeah. Well, and guys, I know there's I know there's nothing more romantic than dating the old man that moved into your dead mom's house with his sister. Like that's a hot situation.
Yep. This is exactly how it works. Yep. So, by the way, Ray Milland, I've just checked. Neath, where he was born, is 29 miles from me currently. So I could probably get to his house in about an hour's drive.
Go get him. Get him on the show.
Boom. He hasn't been dead for a while. I can get his ghost. Who knows? Anyway, it turns out that.
I wonder where he's buried. You know, where would we have to perform the seance?
I don't. Probably the US somewhere. So maybe we should dig him up and bring him home.
I'll mail him.
Sorry. His ashes were scattered in the most amazing Welsh place, Redondo Beach, California.
Yeah, but it's got some unnecessary L's and C's and W's in there.
California. Anyway, there's a CH in there as well. California. Anyway, yeah. So they move into the house, and it turns out that the people that owned it before, the mother died in there. The daughter is now always wanted to stay there, and the grandfather's like, "No, you must never go back there." And then occasionally at night, essentially the sister, who's, again, names I've forgotten, so I'm going to have to keep flicking back and forward for this film as I get Wikipedia in front of me. Pamela Fitzgerald, played by Ruth Hussey.
Rick and Pamela.
Rick and Pamela, that's the one. Pamela keeps kind of hearing things at night, strange kind of crying and moaning sounds. And eventually it's like, oh, we think this is the mother and the daughter. It's like, oh, this is obviously, definitely, it's my mother crying out to me. She wants me to be here. Definitely, this is exactly what is happening. This is Stella, played by Gail Russell, who, I'm looking her up. She died very young. She died at age 36. So I think this is one of her first films. Yeah. So she was like 18 when she was in this. It looks it.
Yeah.
So I'll get everything after. But yeah, so she's going there and going around going, I want to be back here. And everyone's like, no, this is ridiculous. One, you shouldn't believe in ghosts and all this kind of thing. And then it turns out there might be a second ghost there. And they're kind of fighting for possession over her. And there's all kind of tragic backstory and murder and going off cliffs and stuff like that and fighting over people. So the main reason, well, there's a couple of reasons. I think out of the three, this is definitely kind of the most hidden queer kind of subtextually. I think it's one of these things that you can watch quite easily and not pick anything up. If you're
I think
not
back
looking
then, maybe. I think now it seems a little more obvious when a woman and her friend run away with a baby together. It just... It I was watching a lot of it going, okay, where's the... Like, I'm watching this girl and this guy have a romance and his sister lives with him. And yeah, it's weird, but... Like, I don't see anything between these two. And it's all backstory that just gets told later in the movie. And I was finally like, oh, okay.
There's that, and then there's weird, obviously, it's kind of all based around Stella, to be fair.
Stella?
The Stella? The queerness.
Wrong movie.
I mean, there's that, and there's the fact that somebody pointed out in just like a kind of fun blog rundown of this movie, Pamela, it's just like anybody who's unattached at this point and goes around with that kind of energy is definitely butch lesbian, which is obviously probably not intended, but I guess if you want to read it like that, and that kind of energy is just like she's kind of the man of the house and the child's we'll get this all done, they can be like that. But I think a lot of the queer coding is essentially women fighting over possession of a young female. And again, as this same blog post pointed out, there's nothing weirder than being on your own and hearing a woman moaning in the middle of the night in a room far away where you can't see them. So I don't know how much of this is generally in there, but if you can read it like that, then go for it.
I like Dracula's Daughter, where it's kind of depicts on screen, but you can kind of read even further into it. In this, it's nothing depicts on screen. It's all kind of second-hand info, and kind of you don't actually see any of it firsthand. It's people retelling accounts of what happened years and years ago, and you kind of got to put it all together from that.
And we watched the guy play piano to the girl instead, and like I don't know, I spent so much of it going, okay, now when are we getting to it? And I think that's the main problem with it for this episode. Otherwise, it's like it's an interesting 1944 horror movie.
Yeah, that, and I think obviously it was obviously inspired by Rebecca when we go into it, where kind of Mrs. Danvers in there is so much a kind of queer icon at this point, for better or for worse. That kind of aspect is kind of brought into one of the ghosts now, but because therefore they're kind of deprived of a lot of their voice, it kind of gets buried, which is why I think you can watch this and see almost no queer coding at all. But there is enough kind of scholarly stuff out there that people have used it, especially in comparison with Rebecca, to analyse it from a queer subtext point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I mean, I watched it the first time and vaguely remembered it, and watched it again and was like, if nothing else, it is a very interesting thing. I'm looking now that apparently it was based on Uneasy Freehold by Dorothy McArdle, and apparently a copy of it was given to Hitchcock to look over, and who I'm guessing turned it down for whatever reason. Probably because it's just like, I've already done this picture. It was called Rebecca, in the same way that he did about yeah, and they kind of couldn't get it to work. But apparently Hitchcock gave brackets suggestions for it on how to get it to go, which is interesting because the whole point of Rebecca is it's like the greatest ghost story ever with no ghost, and this definitely has ghosts in it.
Yeah,
but the film itself, I think. Go ahead.
I also think because Stella's wandering around going, oh, there's something that feels so queer. I mean, there is that aspect to it. I was just waiting on it more, I think, directly with her, or, like Sam, you were mentioning, it's all spoken, something with characters on screen. And I think it's more like the queerness is a legacy, haunting presence that has
I was going to say,
to be stripped from the text.
Yeah, it's almost like the queerness is the ghost in this, or at least one of the many ghosts, because there are multiple aspects to it. So you have kind of the haunting idea of kind of almost lesbianism trying to rip apart Ray Milland and Stella from this, because there is essentially kind of possessions happening, and therefore it literally comes into a female invading the body of another female, and I think actually that makes it different even to now, because a lot, if we think of kind of possession movies, ghost movies, demon movies, stuff like that, it's typically a male presence. And at least if there's one individual target, when there's like like The Nun or something like that, or these kinds of movies, quite often
isn't The Nun a man dressed up as a woman?
I can't remember. I tried to block The Nun out of my head. But when you do have these kind of, I don't know, evil witch kind of characters come back as ghosts, quite often they'll possess multiple kind of things throughout at various points. It's very rare that you have a singular female identifiable entity going after a single younger female kind of entity. You think of something like The Exorcist, Ray Russell's book, The Case Against Satan, all these kinds of things. It's normally a male kind of entity in that way, which makes it kind of interesting if you think about it almost from a pseudo-sexual dynamic of being entered into by another entity. From that point of view, there's an interesting on that. And people have even pointed out the weirdness of kind of the mother's ghost on that. There's a weird, almost incestuous kind of thing going on there, which makes it slightly weird and uncomfortable, which, for 1944, in the middle of the Hays Code, in the middle of World War II, is massively weird.
Yeah, because the main twist at the end is, the ghost they've been hearing is so there's two ghosts, but it turns out she's the daughter of the other one. Not the one who she always knew as her mum, but she was she's actually the daughter of the other woman. And it's like I said, there is this kind of almost Oedipal kind of element to it, and this kind of very strange kind of family dynamic kind of fight over a daughter's kind of allegiances and love, I suppose, and just how because basically it kind of ends when she kind of realizes the truth, doesn't it? Like gives the ghost peace, doesn't it? The ghosts. Although I don't really get I get why that quietens down her actual mother ghost, but I'm not sure why it quietens down. Well, I suppose Ray Milland stands up to the other one, doesn't he? Kind of, he gets to be the manly man. March up and goes, see here, ghost. We've had just about enough of all your.
Does a Heather Langenkamp? I take all your power from you, Freddie. You don't scare me anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I do want to say on this as a film in general. Is that at the 17th Academy Awards, cinematographer Charles Lang was nominated for the Academy Award. He didn't get it, but he.
It's a gorgeous looking movie.
Yeah, it is. Even a slightly dodgier quality wherever you see it. It is very well made, and let's be honest, a haunted house movie getting nominated at the Oscars for anything at any point is massive. The fact that this got nominated for the cinematography is certainly interesting, and it's definitely a nice little kind of artifact to go back kind of and find. It's over 80 years old at this point. It should be in the public domain, I would guess. But just to find this little nugget hidden away, because I think unless you're going through like Ray Milland's filmography or going through Oscar-nominated cinematography, you're probably not going to find it unless you just happen to stumble across it. It's not a film that you go looking for. And I think looking at it from the queer perspective, kind of how it's hidden from this kind of perspective, it makes it interesting that you kind of rediscover films that have kind of been lost. And I always like going back and finding these kind of little gems in there.
Yeah, definitely.
It may be a little bit boring, and I will say I'm not a fan of the ghost effect. That's not great.
I thought it was cool.
But it's 1944, so...
Yeah, I thought for the 40s it was fine. It kind of
it's 40s Ghostbusters CGI,
Yeah. Well, it does look makes like me go, how did they do that?
I presume it's cell animation. I presume they've actually just drawn on the, on the film stock.
It fills the whole frame. Like I think it's a cool kind of presentation of film ghost that I hadn't seen, because now they're usually a specific creature or invisible, or they're kind of more defined, I feel like, than it is here. It felt really spectral and
or they're just people with a load of white face makeup and black around the eyes.
Or a big massive puppet Night of the Demons style.
Oh, I just realized I'm confusing the nun with the bride ghost in Insidious. So,
yes, you're right.
It's all the same load of bleh.
The widow, the black bride, or whatever she's called. She's the one with the dodgy trans implications. Yeah.
Yes, fact check myself.
Yeah, on awful sequels to movies that were standard to begin with.
Earlier I mixed up The Crying Game and Boys Don't Cry, so
we're doing well so far. Anyway, go find The Uninvited, because it's certainly an interesting
I will say that there's a very nice Criterion Collection version of it out there, which I would highly recommend. That's how I watched it. I mean, that's how I came onto this film originally. It just buying random Criterions, thought, oh, this looks interesting, never heard of this before, and bring it home, thought, oh, this is quite good, actually.
Well, I don't know about you guys. The copy of the next film that we watched, it wasn't super great for me. How were your copies of Tea and Sympathy?
Fine. I watched mine on HBO Max, and thought it was a decent enough print.
It was decent enough, but I watched the grainiest stuff in existence. So, I will take anything. Can I make out what's happening? Yes, I'll take it.
Yeah, I watched it on. I rented it. Now I wish I had bought it, but I rented it through Apple, and the ending scene in the dark forest was like a little bit scratchy, and there was some audio sync issues. I didn't know if it was my internet, if it was the original film, the current. I don't know.
No, it's an
weird.
absolute slight on Deborah Kerr. That's what it is.
Yeah, but maybe all of the actors like were talking out of sync with their I don't know, words. Anyway, Tea and Sympathy is probably the most, not probably, it is the most direct of these three films, where it is actually dealing with issues of queerness and how people perceive and decide on what is other and queer and non-masculine, how that actually kind of expresses in near contemporary America, and it's based on a play, and the other two obviously had to use a bit more metaphor, and yes, this one does have censorship, but it follows a prep schoolboy who gets bullied for not expressing masculinity in the way that society thinks you should, and it leads to him taking some pretty extreme acts. The stage version was directed by Elia Kazan, the same playwright wrote the screenplay for this, so the three main actors were all on the Broadway version. So this is pretty much just a prestige play adaptation by Vincent Minnelli, and yeah, it's a giant production from MGM for sure.
I was watching this, and it's a spoiler, no spoiler. Essentially, this is a full version of about a 30-minute segment of Dead Poets Society.
Yeah,
and I'm actually just looking through. Because I was half going through this, and now I'm looking it up, doing live research. Going, did Dead Poets Society take that kind of segment from this and kind of squeeze it in there? I don't think there'll be any actual interview stuff, but it's so similar that it's untrue.
Yeah, what this made me think of actually was, Kieran, I hope you grew up in slightly more enlightened times, but I'm sure me and Jacob kind of had similar experiences growing up even in the 90s. Still at school, using gay as an insult, that was still kind of around, wasn't it? You don't want to do that. That's gay. Why are you gay?
Unfortunately, I did not grow up in those enlightened times, and even more unfortunately, because I grew up in a fairly rural kind of environment, there weren't too many people. I think we had 2 or 3 kids in my school that were openly gay, and because of that, the kind of exposure to kind of queerness didn't seep into, even I'm ashamed to say, into me until later on, until you kind of have the life experiences to go, okay. Because if you don't have those and everybody else is saying it, unfortunately it seeps into you as well. You just go, this is what happens, and you kind of have to have the thing of going, this isn't good.
Yeah, and there's, as it's always been the same. There's so much pressure, to look and act a certain way, when you're growing up, and what does that say about you, and what can you do, what can't you do, and what does that mean basically? And it's all about kind of passing and meeting society's expectations, which is it's crap that kind of young people still expect to do that. It's not changed since the 50s.
Nope.
Yeah. Well, and even in 90s and 2000s media, where there was consciousness, like that Ellen episode had come out, and Seinfeld had. Not that there's anything wrong with that, there's comedic negotiation that is completely different from the enforced, actual you are being gay to somebody that I saw and experienced, and I don't know how I escaped it. I wasn't particularly masculine, but it was definitely something that was pervasive and accusatory.
I especially remember. Sorry, no, just into my head has popped the episode of Friends with the male nanny. And Ross is just like, "Oh my god, how can you have a male nanny? It's so weird." And I think when you're a kid, and if you're a certain like into it, you're laughing at Ross, kind of going, "Oh my god, it's so weird." And now you go, "That's awful. Like, it's really not good."
Yeah, I think they did that joke a few times. Didn't they do an episode with a male nurse as well? And it was the same gag, basically.
Possibly, yeah.
Well, Ross, like the first episode or whatever, he has his ex leaves him for a woman. Like, you know,
oh yes,
yeah, there was like recognition of it, and that it's okay, and like we shouldn't make fun of people for that. And yet, like, there's a reason people needed to be putting out there, because like that stuff, it probably still exists. I'm not in middle school or high school anymore, but. Even in the enlightened times of 2007, it was there.
I at least where I am and working in my schools, it is getting better, but there will still be, you know, there's always going to be bullying in around schools and kind of young people and anywhere. But it's getting better, but there will still be the odd bit, you know.
Yeah.
In the shadows, you know, by the lockers, that kind of thing. It doesn't go away, unfortunately.
Yeah. So kind of happening in this era, the play came out in 1953, the film in 1956. The Lavender Scare is going on. So yeah, during the Red Scare, Roy Cohn is also directing, who is gay, by the way, directing that, like federal employees and workplaces and things like that, like be on guard for sexual deviance. And like I think just from some federal government resource I read, like 7,000 to 10,000 I think federal employees lost their jobs. You know, who knows how many were truly affected. And a lot of the issue around that was it didn't matter if you were gay or straight. So, you know, also in this era, Hollywood is dealing with the blacklist and all of that stuff. And hey, so is Elia Kazan, by the way.
Yeah. But this is the era of don't ask, don't tell, wasn't it? You know, basically, you know, like in the military, especially, you know, basically, you can be whatever you like, but just don't announce yourself, you know, and then we'll be fine.
Yep.
I mean,
I think you could be dishonorably discharged if you if you were found to be gay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking up the dates. Obviously, Alan Turing, 1952. He's prosecuted for homosexual acts and accepts hormone treatment, which means he has chemical castration, and takes his life in June 1954. So it literally is kind of around the dates of the play coming out. He has now, in recent times, like, you know, decades later, received a posthumous pardon. But yeah. It's not good. Yeah.
Now, the nice thing is that the playwright got to kind of negotiate his own stuff in translating from play to screen. So the play's more explicit. I'll get to some of the more specific differences later. But essentially what the production code, what it needed changed was the way it presented homosexuality, adultery, and prostitution. There were years of debate with the Production Code Administration. There's PGA about like that interplay for translating from stage to screen. Several studios explored adaptation because like it's a giant play, and early PCA responses treated the basic stories unacceptable. MGM got the rights, but they needed a code-approved screenplay, and the final film, it required a lot of revision, moral reframing, Legion of Decency negotiation, and what kind of ends up on the screen itself is more about how I think homophobia emerges out of sort of misogyny and male social performance. So like the way Vito Russo frames it is acting like a sissy. So in the tradition of the sissy on screen, it's failed masculinity, softness, fussiness, artistic temperament, femininity, weakness. In this movie, the main character, Tom, he's going to be reading books on a golf course and sewing at the beach and playing music and admiring, things in the garden. He knows how to plant. Meanwhile, the masculine, manly men, they all go on vacations to mountain lodges together and stay in tight quarters doing, things that we, as a modern listener, might hear and say, okay, I mean, that seems a little bit gay. I know it's not in this situation, but like, there's a new kind of, obviously there's some level of intent to that.
Yeah.
But
being in a confined space with a lot of other men is so much more gay than knowing which flowers are which, and how to.
I still love the. If you, I mean, we did it at one point a while ago. I think the openings of Olympia, Leni Riefenstahl, where it's like 8 minutes of essentially big, muscly German guys in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that was kind of the whole thing of using like thinly veiled homoeroticism as male bonding in order to strengthen ties between them to go forward and sort of take over other nations eventually. It's so funny that obviously like Hitler's propaganda machine. What we're going to use, homoeroticism. Yes, this is the way forward.
I think the biggest change from the play to the screen, and I used a film comment piece and some AFI resource to put this together, like the different changes, because I know nothing about the play. I tried to find the script, couldn't find it to see like what explicit terms were in there, but basically in the film, the main character, Tom, kind of the inciting incident for him is he is seen at the beach with these faculty wives, older women who are sitting around in bathing suits, sewing and reading and sunning, and he joins them rather than joining all the men and boys who are playing like football and other, contact sports on the beach, maybe volleyball too. And the guys see him there and go, okay, well, we need to correct that behavior by being really mean to him. And hopefully that will make him act like a regular guy. And in the play, the scene is that he is seen skinny dipping with a male teacher, Mr. Harris. And like that just completely changes the tone of everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas in the movie, it's kind of a crisis of masculinity that reads as homosexual because of the implications. In the play, it is very explicitly, this kid's gay because he's naked with another dude.
Yeah. And again, this is the whole thing of feminizing the man, and that as opposed to a female being, elevated to a tomboy thing. And this is literally the opening, like 60 odd pages of Celluloid Closet, where the opening chapter is titled "Who's a Sissy?" So it's literally all about kind of this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and this pops up like a ton of times in there across like several different pages throughout that. But like something I picked up on reading about the real play and in the film, like, you can read some of it, but it doesn't come through across as strongly. But the character Bill, who's like the housemaster, the husband of the wife that Deborah Kerr plays, he is kind of like repressed homosexuality, masculine insecurity, and so his distance from Deborah Kerr is played in a more explicitly closeted way.
Because she kind of says it at first, later on, doesn't she? Oh, you didn't used to be like this. When I met you, you were so sensitive and kind.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you wonder, it's like, was he like almost like a Tom back in then, and he was kind of, as society's pressure had to kind of toughen up, and to be seen as like the what a man should be.
Yeah. And so the film, the term it uses to substitute for any kind of, harsher slur or slur adjacent language is sister boy. That is what they call him. They write it on his door. And that's what, at the end, he goes to see just a lady who works at a diner and is not a prostitute. He goes to see her for, a sexual encounter, I suppose. And she calls him sister boy or recognizes the nickname or whatever. And that's the ultimate humiliation, is being a feminized man who sews and plays music. And
She comments on how soft his hands are, doesn't she? She says, "He sounds so soft, just like a girl's."
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the other massive difference is the ending. So in the play, it ends with her saying, "Be kind." Deborah Kerr telling Tom to be kind when she tells guys about this experience that he's about to have. It's basically a Miss Robinson kind of scene. And in the play, it is like explicitly a sexual encounter, and it fades to black at the end. In the film, they're in these pretty woods, and she says, "I'm going to kiss you," and it goes on from there. It has like frame story stuff, backstory stuff, but the play, it ends on that note of like, because there is the like kind of romanticized aspect from Tom of the entire story. I don't know how much of that is conveyed in the play versus the film, but in the movie, there's a very romantic quality to that scene. In the play, I don't think it was present because it's about adultery with a teenage boy. Yeah, they had to have a scene where she wrote a letter and said, "It's actually bad that I did an adultery by kissing you," because of the Hays Code. So, pretty much the entire frame story thing was made up. But the frame story is Tom goes back to his old prep school, and he goes into the home that he used to live in. And then at the end, Bill is there, and his wife has left him, and she is regretful and acted poorly. But the reason she did that is the story of the play, which is, old Tom, he wants to play the woman in the school play. He volunteered for that. He's on the dance committee. He's very active. He plays tennis. He's great at it.
Yeah.
But, because of the way that he acts effeminate. He doesn't like traditionally masculine things. He's very secure in himself and loses a lot of his confidence and things like that. It's the inverse of a kid's movie where you find who you are and become self-assured. It's about his dad and institution trying to tear him down.
Yeah, so he says at one point, "No one used to care how I walked or how I had my hair." This kind of all happened, since this stuff at at the college. I mean, his dad is just a monster in this. I mean, he's just kind of completely tears him down. It's all about how his son makes him look, to the outside world, and it's like a slight on his masculinity if his son isn't deemed manly enough. It's just he's telling him how to live his life, how he should be, and basically saying you've got to be this way or you're dead to me, essentially.
It's the bit about getting him to stop playing the part in the theatre, which is pretty much exactly the same as Dead Poets. And you're watching that, and it is heartbreaking because he's literally holding a phone out to him, and just knowing that the kid's got to do it because he's never going to stand up to his father like this. It is heartbreaking, especially as kind of arts people ourselves, I mean, I didn't do drama, but it's just like any kind of arts going, no, you can't do that, you have to be kind of the sporty athletic kind. I'm just like, no, thank you, no,
High School Musical.
Don't care about sports at all. It's awful.
So the film is presented in CinemaScope and Metrocolor. So think about when you went to see this, it's exhibited in massive widescreen, this play, and it really does the job of making this feel like I'm watching a movie and not watching a play that has been shot on a sound stage. You know, so many...
I mean, just the scenes of like Deborah Carr, you know, in the garden, you know, just with her kind of wonderful red hair and like all the flowers and everything in bloom, you know, just how the colours pop, you know, it's a really striking kind of image, you know. And it's often a challenge, isn't it, how, you know, taking a play from, you know, from stage to screen, or how do you make it kind of worth the transition, basically. You know, you can't just have people talking in a room, you know, or like, you know, two locations. Usually you've got to expand it out and, you know, can justify the big screen experience. I think they definitely do that here.
I will put a thing about Deborah Kerr in of the if I had £1 for every time Deborah Kerr in a film inappropriately kisses a much younger male, I would have £2. It's not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice.
Yeah.
You know,
also,
this and,
no relation between
Deborah
Kerr and Jeff Kerr or John Kerr. They're not related.
Yeah, they're not related. Imagine that must have been a weird kind of conversation like day one. Like, I was like, oh, okay. Are related? Don't think so.
Just checking through the script, going, "Can we just do a background check, quick?"
Yeah. I think the, you know, Academy ratio. We're gonna have, you know, 2-3 actors in this kind of tight space, and we'll pan around, we'll move, we'll use the space, like that. I don't love those styles compared to this. Having this giant set where like there's a moment where towards the end Tom like crumples down in a chair and like Deborah Kerr is kind of walking towards him or whatever, but it just puts these actions that these actors have done hundreds of times live on a stage onto this, you know, giant mural setting, and it looks really beautiful. I also think the way that rooms are made to be larger through being separated into 2 shots, we're not getting the full wide effect of what the space looks like, works really well. There's a lot of nice push-ins on the action that, you know, Kieran, I know you hate zooms. Like Vincent Minnelli, he's a guy that knew what he was doing visually with his team, and this takes what could be a much smaller visual, you know, mise en scène into like a really interesting and just fascinating to look at visual space.
Yeah.
Yep. Kind of,
just, you
know,
a really nice looking
people.
Film.
Yeah, definitely. Back then, you know, this was a film that did decently financially. It made like $3.5 million off 1.7 million. I mean, we're in the period where people are watching TV. Like it's not blowing anything out of the water, but it's all right. You know what Russo said about it. He says that it's useful, but like because of the way that the film has to, because of the code, kind of absorb Tom into definite, you know, correct, quote unquote, social stances and mores.
They've got to have a no homo kind of code, haven't they? Really,
yeah.
They're just.
You know, it's a bit compromised, whereas the play has a bit more of a question and tension of, is he gay? Like, that's something you could talk about. I don't think you can really argue that this presentation of Tom is queer. I think he is just what we would think of now today as like a nerd. Like he's just a nerd. Like he's way ahead of his time. He's a male feminist, you know. He's reading not reading. He's carrying around Simone de Beauvoir. Except no, you know what? Tom is reading it because Tom is a genuine good person. It seems like it's just being broken by society and the expectations of patriarchy.
I mean, yes, with the code there and the ending, for some reason, I'm now thinking of the ending for Suspicion, Hitchcock, where it's been leading up so much that Cary Grant is actually a murderer, but then you have to have it so that it actually know your suspicions were wrong the entire time. And I know it was based on a book, but I don't know the ending of that. I'm wondering if that was to get around the Hays Code. Yeah, because if you have him you can't have him get away with it, but who's going to kill off Cary Grant in a movie? So we'll have it actually, no, all your suspicions wrong, because I know this is what Tarantino absolutely hates about this movie, about suspicion, is the ending for it. And I'm going, they had to do the same thing there with the ending of that? Yeah. But I'd never really even considered the reason for that is not a creative choice. It's just, we have to do this to satisfy
industrial reality's choice.
Yeah. And it does, again, the Hays Code does bring into the fact that, yes, we treat kind of film as an art form, but it's also a business. And if you want your thing to be shown, you have to abide by certain business practices. And if these are the business practices at the time, then they've got to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to pass your quality checks, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I was looking for this a second ago. There were critics at the time that objected to like the changed ending and the changed message, essentially, of the film. And the Legion of Decency also still found it morally objectionable. So obviously, it didn't really please anybody in that sense. And, you know, I think modern views kind of go along the lines of Rousseau, where, yeah, I mean, it's a good film. It has strengths, it has weaknesses, but because the era it's made in, it's limited in trying to express the
punches.
Original point, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's interesting in terms of kind of representation and kind of expectations of gender and sexuality of that time, and kind of that balancing act. But as you say, it's missing that edge. Although, you know, I was thinking kind of like the last kind of 10-15 minutes, thinking of saying, oh yeah, it's been good, you know, but I've not really had an emotional reaction to it. And then you had like Deborah Carr's kind of letter at the end, and I had a bit of a tear in my eye at that. I was like, oh, okay, nice emotional punch, you know, to cap everything off, you know.
All the performances are great,
things, sort of. Yeah. I think the phrase "any representation is better than no representation." It's a starting point. They're doing what they can in the limited structure they've got, you know. That and you talking about the critics. I was just thinking that if he'd have been around at this point, Ebert would have absolutely blasted this film for the ending and gone, "What have you done?" And just ripped into them for changing the ending from the play.
Yeah, and I do think there's truth to the way that homophobia does kind of stem just generally from misogyny and the patriarchal structure of society. Like all of that. It's otherizing people that would otherwise be in like the dominant, you know, social group in American society. You can point to this person and say they are gay because they are not acting like we expect a man to act. And I think the important part is just expanding what are allowances for what masculinity can. You could be a straight man who does dance, and in the same way that we allow. Not allow, but like society allows for women now to go into STEM and be directors and things like that. We're trying to empower and grow that. You know, men should not feel shame for being artistic, not being traditionally masculine, but still having a certain, you know, that doesn't make you gay. That can, you know, whatever.
I still always think of the kind of online internet thing of that the modern male role model should actually be Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, you know. He goes and slices down orcs and leads armies. At the same time, he sings, you know, he gives kind of thoughtful, he relies on his friends for help in times of weakness and all these things, you know.
And he opens doors really well.
Yes, he does. I'm not sure if that's coming out of a closet or just entering a room, but, you know, if you need a good male role model, Aragorn.
I think the main thing I just want to express is not that there's anything wrong with that. That's kind of my summary here. So, yes. No, it's really interesting to see a film that is really close to being explicit about all of these ideas right at the end of the Code era. So it's cool. It's a good movie.
It's quite funny. It's the equivalent of reading a YA novel that's in like book 7 or 8, where the characters are now 17 and 18, and you know that the author wants to actually write them as they would be speaking and acting and doing things, but can't. I mean, yesterday I was on a school trip to the Harry Potter studios and back, so I spent 7 to 8 hours on a bus with 11, 12 and 13-year-olds, and it's like the language going on there, it's just like that's what these like YA authors want to use but can't, because there's still like 8-year-olds that could be reading it, and that's what it feels like watching pretty much all of these films and just seeing them going, we want to do it, but we're not allowed. And so, like, I've had a blast going back and just seeing, again, just a topic that I think, unless you're kind of specifically going to look at, you never would. You know, war movies you can do, they're a dime a dozen, you know, that kind of thing. But going queer haze movies, films, you kind of have to go into it going, I'm going to look at some. And it's a really interesting just topic. It's like a subsection of queer cinema, which is not a topic which is massively discussed anyway. So it's like really digging down into the history of our beloved art form.
I have a decent amount of like queer theory stuff in my like old school notes, but one thing when I think of like what is queer cinema kind of used for in modern theory, it's now like an auteur theory like mode. So it's a way for auteur theory to continue to have meaning, because it can say, oh look, it's queer authors having a voice and expressing themselves in their story, and we can keep this going, and it's not nonsense, and no, it is still valuable extant scholarship.
Yeah.
Still hate auteur theory anyway.
Yeah. I do wonder if a part of it is because it is like a positive, you know, kind of social thing. That's why it gets put into it, because it's good marketing.
Yeah. We will do a whole thing on auteur theory at some point. Anyway.
Yes. But yeah, we'll be back with future stuff next week, such as maybe Rebecca. Until then, guys, where can people find you?
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film and at the Second Cut Pod Substack, where I've just posted my review of Masters of the Universe. Obviously, the toys and the cartoon a bit before my time, so I don't really know it as a franchise, but I had fun with it for what it is. So, yeah, check out my review.
Fun is fun. Hopefully you don't find me anywhere. If you do, I'm Judgmental in various places. Not had anything recently. I had a lot going on. Maybe I'll try and get something up at some point.
And you can find me at Jacob Film Guy. Obsession, still making money. So that's pretty cool. Good for them.
That
you
thing
can
is
find
insane that it's still going.
Yeah, it's awesome. You can find us at Second Cut Pod. Email us at secondcutpod@gmail.com. That is it. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Adios.
Goodbye.